Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Dr. Bob Gill, a general practitioner in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS. He's making a crowd-funded film, The Great NHS Heist. Dr. Bob, welcome back.
Hello, Max. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Dr. Bob, your thoughts on the so-called healthcare debate in the United States, and how do they relate to the film you're making?
Well, there's a common theme here, Max. The insurance industry seems to be dominating the American healthcare system, and they managed to negotiate a very friendly Obamacare deal for themselves. And it seems that Trump wants to abandon 24 million Americans, whilst at the same time, particularly United Health has its eyes on our National Health Service.
Yeah, exactly. This is a point that many are not understanding, is that when Americans point to the British healthcare system and say, oh, it's free, how do they do it? They don't understand that American healthcare insurance companies are in the process of privatizing or corporatizing your healthcare system, and you are trying desperately to fight back. You can't seem to get the message across to the British population about the dire straits of their NHS. Why is that?
We have a big problem with our mainstream media, Max. I've encountered censorship when I've tried to get this message out myself. The BBC, of course, failed to tell the British population what is happening behind the scenes. They're very clever. They're hiding everything they're doing behind the NHS logo. So at the moment, the patient doesn't really see what's going on. But behind the scenes, our clinical commissioning groups are largely being taken over by American firms like Optum, which is a subsidiary of United Health. We've also got Keiser Permanente in there. But you cannot get this through on mainstream media. And this is why we're having to produce our own film to get the message out. Because I strongly believe if only enough of the British population realized what was at stake here, they would push back and not let this happen.
Yes, it's a message that doesn't seem to get through to the average British person, because, of course, at the moment, when they go to their healthcare provider, it is free at the point of service. However, that'll be the last domino to fall, is that when everything's been taken over, they'll start to charge people at the point of service, but by then it'll be much too late to fight back. Now, many in the United States are against universal health care coverage because they say there are these so-called death panels under socialized medicine. Now, have you seen any of these death panels, and do you know what these conspiracy theories are referring to, Dr. Bob?
Well, I've been working in the National Health Service for about 20 years. I've not come across any death panels. Certainly the care that my patients need, they get the care. The only death panels I have come across are those operated by the American insurance companies, who make sure if you become ill and expensive, that they will look for a reason to exclude you from payment.
Yeah, let's get back to this Obamacare. The Democrats here in the U.S. support Obamacare and are celebrating that it was not repealed under the recent legislative loss by the Trump administration. So to you in the UK, does Obamacare at all look like a universal health care policy? And isn't Obamacare coming to the UK? In other words, Obamacare is privatization. It's coming to the UK. It doesn't look like universal health, does it?
It's far from universal health care. You've still got the intermediaries, the insurance company, who are completely unnecessary for a medical transaction. And, you know, we have universal health care in England at the moment. Everybody is covered. It's paid through taxation, general taxation. You know, part of the research we've done for the film is to speak to single-payer advocates in America, Professors Himmelstein and Woolhandler, who've been working on this for 20 years. And it turns out that the Americans pay 60% of the 18% GDP cost through taxation. So, in fact, you already pay double what we pay through the taxation system, but you're subsidizing the insurance company profits. And this is a crazy system you've got over there.
Right. People don't understand that. We pay, as you point out, a huge tax subsidy to the insurance companies, the health insurance companies. Then on top of that, they charge on a monthly basis for the exact same service. And this is for a health product that might cost $2,000 or $3,000 for a service. It ends up costing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. $45,000 or more goes directly into the pockets of a health insurance executive who might be making $60 or $65 million a year. That's taken directly out of people's health. It's draconian. It's quite a shocking. But when you say that you have universal health care in the United Kingdom, on the back end, of course, it's in deficit. And the debts are growing rapidly, and the government is unwilling to cover those debts, and they are bleeding it to death, waiting for the day when it collapses so that they can sell the whole thing lock, stock, and barrel to America, correct?
That's correct. What they've done is cleverly set up hospitals with private finance initiative, very expensive loans. They've also framed the hospitals in terms of standalone businesses, and they've set them unrealistic financial targets so they can paint the picture of financial failure. But what they've also done is since 2010, they've relatively underfunded the health service, historically 4% rise per year, but we've been getting less than 1%. And now the NHS is on its knees. Staff are struggling to cope, there's not enough beds, and patients are experiencing bad care. And that will help the narrative that they are building that the NHS can no longer cope. Oh, guess what? We'll look for a solution from our American cousins.
You know, it seems to me, looking at this situation, Dr. Bob, you know, the NHS was set up after World War II. And during that period of time in British history, there was a great camaraderie. All the classes kind of got together and they generated some welfare state goodies, including the National Health Service. But as Britain enters the 21st century, all that goodwill is long gone, and what's left is a reversion back to the traditional British role of lords and serfs, of an entrenched rich class and a permanent underclass of poor. And so there's no place for an NHS in a traditional British society. The NHS was an anomaly. It was a freak show, and it's being written out of existence. Your thoughts?
I'd like to believe you're wrong, Max. I'm trying my hardest to prove you to be wrong. If you look at the surveys of the general public, even 70% of Conservative voters, Tory voters, believe the NHS as a model and believe it should continue. The problem is the propaganda against the NHS is so effective. And that's that propaganda we have to try and counter with what we're trying to do in terms of educating the people. You know, thanks to programs like the Keiser report and other very good documentaries on RT, a bit of that information is coming out. And as we saw with the rise of Bernie Sanders, there's a general popular feeling, even in America, that the system is broken as it is. And we do need, in America, you do need to move to universal health care and the single payer. But otherwise, we're going to head in the direction that you describe.
Well, on the point of education, to try to get through the propaganda that is the British media, you are putting together a crowdfunded film, The Great NHS Heist. So can you tell us about the film?
Well, the film is looking at the three aspects of the heist. We've called it a heist because that's an Americanism. And what we have is our political class being complicit with the theft of our land and assets that the hospital are built on. Certainly the recurring £100+ billion budget that the NHS attracts. And we've also got the theft of data. Now, the NHS has one of the best health data set, and that has significant commercial value. And this is what we were trying to point out to the British public, that there's a great prize at stake here for people like United Health and for Google and other players. They're ready to come and pick our pockets.
Well, the data is so important. it is part of the information age. It's the prima franca of our 21st century economy. And of course, private companies like Google would love access to all the NHS data to help them do their marketing. You know, there's an interesting conflict developing because in the wake of the recent tragedy in London, the attacks on Westminster Bridge, the response of the government is to take a look at encryption and communications and to become quite strict and draconian about how data is processed and how it's stored. But the British government has quite a horrible track record in this area. They're constantly losing data. They're getting hacked all the time. And why would anyone trust them with the data to begin with? It's already going to private contractors. Your thoughts?
I think you're right. There is absolutely no reason to trust the government on data. In fact, we found out recently, thanks to some research done and freedom of information requests, that Google, through their subsidiary DeepMind, was handed over 1.2 million NHS records, supposedly to develop an app. But actually, they were given far more records than they needed, and they didn't go through the regulatory hurdles that they needed to go through. But the feeling amongst tech experts is what they're actually doing is working on developing artificial intelligence to contribute to replacing the medical staff. So this is a great threat to our medical system, and it's going on under, behind closed doors.
Okay, so Dr. Bob, where can people go if they want to help crowdfund your film?
They need to go to GoFundMe/The Great NHS Heist, and please help us finish this film. We need help for post-production and distribution. Any help we get will be greatly appreciated.
All right, so that's the GoFundMe platform, GoFundMe/The Great NHS Heist. Dr. Bob Gill, a hardworking general practitioner who believes in medicine, believes in healthcare, and is trying to save your NHS over there in Britain from the propagandists and the private American contractors. So see if you can throw him a few bob. Dr. Bob, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Max.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Dr. Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. If you want to reach us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.